Azoth by Zeitgeistic. Chapter 3. Calcination. Calcination. A thermal treatment process in absence of air applied to ores and other solid materials to bring about a thermal decomposition, phase transition, or removal of a volatile fraction. For all his determination, he was sort of terrified of actually approaching Malfoy. But he'd sorted it well, and by the end of the week, he'd convinced himself to get it over with. It was a nightmare about being an aura that finally settled matters. Anything was better than that, even potions, even 3 years as Snape's apprentice. Malfoy tended to grab his dinner and take it back to the common room, which had always been great in Harry's opinion, since he didn't have to share a table with him, but now he wondered what it would be like to be around him, play Snap with him, talk Quidditch with him. Be his friend. Be more. Dangerous thoughts. But then he'd always got a bit of a high from danger. Harry waited for him outside the great hall doors in the interest of avoiding onlookers. Even while walking, Malfoy's table manners were flawless. He was tearing off a piece of bread, buttering only that piece with a floating knife and butter. "Malfoy, wait!" Malfoy looked back but didn't stop. He was wearing his reading glasses. Why Harry never noticed whenever he wore them before, he couldn't say, because they were rather fetching. "What is it, Potter?" He fell into step beside him. The little butter knife kept following them, but Malfoy had stopped eating. Actually, now that he was doing it, he really had no idea whatsoever how to ask Malfoy for help. It wasn't like they were mates. "I need help from you." Malfoy frowned. "How horrible for you." Harry closed his eyes briefly. This was a stupid idea. "I told McGonagall I wanted to be a potions master, so now I need to get an O on my potion newt, and Hermione's busy, and you're the only other person smart enough to explain potions theory to me." He hesitated. The next words were painful to say. "I'm begging you. My future depends on this." When had he become so neurotic around Malfoy? Malfoy stopped here, and the butter knife stopped with him. He unscrewed the cap on a posh glass water bottle and took a sip. He said, "Potter, have you lost your mind? You're rubbish at potions." Harry pursed his lips. "You aren't." Malfoy shrugged. "True, but I'm preparing for a transfiguration apprenticeship. I don't have time to teach you potions, nor do I care to." So that was what he was seeing McGonagall about. "I'll pay you." Malfoy looked incredulous. "What would I do with more money?" "I'll pay you in another way." This made Malfoy pause, and it was a moment before Harry realized what he'd said, and his face burned. Malfoy looked Harry up and down, like he was a racehorse he was considering purchasing. He smirked, and it wasn't a nice, amused one like Hermione's. "I meant I could help you with something too." "Are you any good at transfigurations?" Malfoy asked. He sipped his water again, as if this was the dullest thing that had ever happened to him. Harry wanted to scream. Why could Malfoy have asked for defense help, or snitch-catching help, or surviving Dark Lord's help, or even not being a git help? Any of those things Harry could help with. Reluctantly, he said, "Average." Malfoy shook his head. "Not interested. See you, Potter." "Wait!" Malfoy paused, but he didn't look pleased about it. He didn't care. He still needed to get an O, whether he got to satisfy his morbid curiosity about Malfoy in the interim or not. "Wait, could you just maybe tell me where I could start then? A book that would explain the foundations to me in, I don't know, Muggle-born terms?" Malfoy snorted. "Merlin, Potter, you're as mad as a centaur. But it will at least be interesting watching you fail. You do that well enough. Try Dosage by Paracelsus. It explains the importance of balance, measurement, and ingredient preparation, or foundations of brewing. Are you sure you can understand things like centimeters and milliliters?" He already turned the corner when Harry passed out the insult and remembered to yell out, "Thanks, Malfoy, but fuck off, Potter," came floating back anyway. Madame Pince appeared aggrieved when he asked where the potions section was. She pointed wordlessly, and Harry followed the gesture to the north corner of the library, where the wall sconces seemed to be struggling against the shadows. The wizarding cataloging system had only helped to stump out whatever Ravenclaw tendency he might have once had. It took him 20 minutes to find Paracelsus, who was not located near any other P authors, but instead under a subcategory of German and Swiss wizards who wrote on alchemy, potions, poultices, and transmutation, sorted by year and relevance to modern magic. When he'd asked for Muggle-born terms, he's meant modern Muggle-born terms. Dosage was written in the most obstructive, archaic language Harry had ever had the misfortune of encountering. He took lots of notes as he forced himself through the first few chapters, but he wasn't sure they helped, and he really had no idea what an Azoth was or why it was so essential to alchemy. "Get a plan," Hermione said. "Work backwards from the big potions you'll need to know for the nude, and subcategorize them into details of things you need to relearn, or learn altogether." It sounded great in theory. Hermione's own research into the matter of nudes 2 years ago confirmed that students were always asked to brew 1 of 6 standard potions and answer questions on 3 of the other 5. Heart Helper Potion, Draught of the Living Death, Cold Cure, Suntan Solution, Liver Repair Elixir, and Memory Tonic. You would need to brew one of those perfectly, without aid of notes. Each of them was so complex, convoluted, arbitrary, and time-consuming that it would be impossible for anyone to really remember the recipes by heart without actually understanding the way the magic of potions worked. He wrote each of those at the top of a piece of parchment with lines breaking them down by ingredients, preparation, base, cauldron, brewing style, and time, and underlying theories. After a good start, he thought. In his notes he scrawled, "The first step of brewing a potion is to determine the appropriate base. How?" Bases separated into 7 categories. 1. Distilled water. 2. Aqua vitae. 3. Aqua regia. 4. Aqua fortis. 5. Cinnabar. Maybe it should be used in nutrient potions since it sounds like it tastes good at least. 6. Vitriol. No doubt what Snape made all of his potions out of. 7. Sal ammoniac. Determining the base. Okay, he made a note. He would need to cross-reference that before he left tonight to find a text more focused on that sort of thing. He was making progress. He was at least learning how far behind he was. Well. Charm me surprised. You're actually reading. Harry tensed. The skin on his shoulders felt warm and tingly. Malfoy was right behind him. He could almost feel the warmth of his skin. He turned. "Malfoy." Malfoy inclined his head. "Oh, I thought you were having me on, I admit. But here you are, studying potions." "Here I am," Harry agreed. "Can I help you?" "No, as we've already established." Nevertheless, Malfoy moved around the table and pulled a spare chair on. The loss of his body heat in the air around Harry was palpable and aggravating. Malfoy was like Finfire, probably. It was not good to be near him, even if he did warm Harry up. Malfoy dropped a copy of Metamorphosis on the table and sat. It was at least 5 inches thick, and therefore unlikely the one by Kafka that Hermione read in 3rd year. "You definitely not want to use Cinnabar in a nutrient potion," Malfoy said offhandedly. He flipped a page. "It's another name for mercury, moron." "How do you know when to use which base?" Malfoy rolled his eyes. "How do you know which arm movement to use with a new spell?" Harry scrunched his nose. "Some movements just feel right." Malfoy looked up at his plan. "Interesting. So you are intuitive? I'd wondered." Seemingly realizing he'd sort of complimented Harry, he concluded, "At least you have that going for you." "I'm a Gryffindor. It's what we do." Malfoy muttered something unflattering under his breath. Then, "Intuitive magic user Potter. Really. It's all in how you direct your magic. About half of all wizards can intuit the right spell movement or the right potion prep or what have you. The other half have to learn each part for everything they do, using a tried-and-true formula instead of their own innate understanding of magic. They do much worse on their exams generally." The table seemed much smaller all of a sudden. Malfoy's voice had a way of reverberating softly off the walls and books of the library and coming back to Harry's skin. He felt warm. He wanted to know what Malfoy was like around his Slytherins, when it was just them and their mythical weekend hedonism fests. Maybe he could trick it out of Millicent. It became apparent that Malfoy had no intention of speaking to him anymore. It was just after the good lightning at Harry's table. That wasn't acceptable. Harry cleared his throat. So, transfigurations? Malfoy made an agreeable noise, which was a good sign. Why? I didn't even know you were good at transfigurations. I thought you were good at potions. Malfoy rolled his eyes. I can be good at more than one thing. Just like you can be average at more than one thing. I'm good at Quidditch. Malfoy turned the page, didn't look up. So go play Quidditch. Harry huffed. I want to do something unexpected. I don't want to be average. Well, I do, but not at magic, just at personality. I assure you, Potter, said Malfoy as he jotted down a note in green ink, the same colour ink Harry liked. You are average at personality, too. Harry narrowed his eyes. Malfoy was just being a twat, which was nothing new. Why Harry supposed Malfoy might have changed was beyond him. Or rather, Malfoy had changed, just not in the way that Harry wanted. What he wanted, he could admit in the abyssal corners of his mind, was Malfoy's attention. He was making a fool of himself trying to get it. That's not what I meant. You said it. You know what I meant, said Harry, staring angrily at his own green inkwell. I don't want to be only good for Dark Lord defeating and printing gossipy stories about. The silence stretched, but when he looked up again, Malfoy was looking at him, his eyes strangely bright. I know. The intensity of his stare left Harry momentarily breathless. There was just something about Malfoy that made Harry feel volatile, like a potion one stays a spell away from explosion. Malfoy was already back to his book, staring intently at the animated daguerreotype of a witch morphing into a bat and back again. His bottom lip was caught beneath his two correct canines, and it was perhaps the most sensual thing Harry had ever seen. You were trying for your animagus form. Malfoy nodded. His lip remained caught. Harry stared at his mouth, paying only half a mind to the words coming out of his own. Hermione and I did a bit of that last Christmas. She had a book on it and we were trying to keep our minds off Ron. Malfoy, of course, had no idea what he was talking about, but it seemed to get his attention anyway. How far did you get? Indigenization, said Harry. It was a third step behind meditation and visualization, and the last step before an initial partial transformation. We learned our forms and then Ron came back and we had a lead again, so we stopped. Because there were more important things to worry about again. Malfoy pushed his book aside. What's your form? Harry smirked. Not saying. Must be stupid then, Malfoy said. Are you Fluffy? Harry didn't even have a problem with his form anymore, but he'd finally got Malfoy's attention and he wasn't going to relinquish it so quickly. Tell me yours first. Malfoy scowled. No. The way he looked at his inkwell, then his fancy 10-galleon quill, then Madame Pince made it clear. Slowly, Harry grinned. You can't do it, can you? Of course I can. You don't even know what yours is going to be. You can't visualize it, can you? I only started trying a couple of months ago, Malfoy said hardly. It's not as if it's a weekend flue parlor renovation. I got to the third step in under a month. I bet I know why you can't do step 2, said Harry. Malfoy sighed, pushed his book to the side. Potter? No, really, Harry said. I had trouble with visualization too until I realized what I was doing wrong. If you help me catch up on potions, I'll show you how to transform. Malfoy paused. His eyes lifted, met Harry's. They were cold, mercurial, mutable, like cinnabar. Fine, Friday, in the spare dungeons classroom, but I warn you, I won't be a pocket potioneer. I'll give you advice, but you have to do the work. Harry turned back to his book and notes, but he couldn't help the stupid smile crossing his face. Okay, good. Malfoy merely hummed in response, but that was okay. That was good. Know your base, Dosage said. Harry understood that passage now. Potions were a bit like him and Malfoy. Volatile ones needed volatile base. Fortifying ones needed a fortified base. Life-giving ones needed a life-giving base. Cinnabar aqua fortis, aqua vitae. Malfoy was probably all those things to Harry. The more he understood Malfoy, the more he understood patience. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Azoth by Zeitgeistic. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube AO3 or Spotify.